Does someone have the YouTube window open? Okay, good.
Yes,
Okay,
it's
we're
me.
good. It's all good. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Sun and the Moon. Um, this this week we have Benjamin Acadia, a consultant experienced in all facets of growing between hydroponic, living soil, organic cultivation, and hybridization of all concepts. Ben, would you like to talk a little bit about what you do?
Sure. First off, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it, Luna and Gwen. It's great to always see you guys. Really big fan. So right now, what I've been focusing on the past few years is integrated systems design. So basically creating cultivation facilities from the ground floor up, working with architects and engineers, and helping the grower that's going to be running the facility really be able to achieve a lot of their maximum potential by making sure that they don't run into any of the pitfalls that are really, really common in the industry when building facilities. And then aside from that, I do a lot of cultivation management of facilities, helping growers really, again, achieve their potential, learning new methods and refining SOPs. And then one of my favorite things to do is just to teach, educate, and speak to people.
That's fantastic. That's so amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on here. I'm really excited to get into some science heavy concepts with you. Um,
Absolutely.
in the past, we've talked, kind of off screen. We've talked quite a bit about secondary metabolites and different cultivation techniques to just ultimately create the best product, right? The most desirable end product for the consumer, and different ways of achieving that. Um, so let's just get like right into it. Let's talk about secondary metabolites. Do you want to explain to people maybe a little bit like what secondary metabolites are, why they're so important, and why they've been focused on a lot in the industry today?
Sure. So for people that are just getting into this and learning about what secondary metabolites really are, like what are metabolites and how are they created within the plant, essentially they're a key part of plant physiology. They're chemical constructs that are created through the plant synthesis. The most common ones that we're going to be associated with are cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids. They're essentially complex hydrocarbon chains. And so it's different chains of molecules assembled in different ways that the plant creates for different specific purposes within its own body. Much like we do ourselves, we have metabolites within our bodies that we create to be able to do things like move, to be able to digest, to be able to breathe, to be able to think. So for plants, it's very, very specific to the synthesis of tissues and the synthesis of chemical constructs. So predominantly with the metabolites that we're looking at are the ones that are geared towards chemical construction versus tissue construction, at least for the majority of the time when we're thinking about stimulation. There is becoming more and more prevalent the type of stimulation, and biostimulants are coming out that are able to help with the increase of actual synthesis of tissue. So increasing biomass, increasing literally cellular matrix size, increasing stalk diameter, branch strength, cola size, trichome size, and even calyx size. So all of those things are created through these chemical constructs that the plant creates from the nutrients that we provide to it, but also the stimulations, either abiotic or biotic, living or non-living. Or sorry, that would be reversed. Abiotic is non-living and biotic is living. That are able to influence it and create epigenetic expression and get the plant to give us the types of expressions that we're looking for of high yields, robust growth, really vigorous development and structure, and then high amounts of cannabinoids and terpenes and flavonoids. And also diversity of the portfolio, not just high THC, but a lot of different cannabinoids making up that total active cannabinoid content.
And other like sulfur-based compounds, things that provide our full aroma profile, our thiols, our phenols, things that kind of just build the entire effect of like the cannabis.
Ethyls.
And really, yeah, and then yes, and set the product aside from other product on the market, which is why these products have become so popular and kind of pushed lately, is so that people can really create a product that sets itself aside from other people's products that aren't using these sciences.
Yep. Couldn't agree more.
So in organic cultivation, this is a lot of like what I'm focusing on, is creating different profiles of, carbon-based, chains, organic acids, carboxylic acids, to provide a full profile of plant stimulating molecules, right? Compounds that stimulate the physiology of the plant and give it a fuller genetic expression. And so I found in organic cultivation is that we're able to incorporate all of these through like the diversity of biology and the diversity of inputs, um, to kind of let the soil um, ferment and convert things from one form to another, through like interaction of root exudates and stuff like that. If we're not using that kind of system, because I know you're talking about products that are these biostimulants, what kind of products are people talking about using these days to promote those effects outside of a living soil system?
So, however much I love living soil, the vast majority of my clients don't operate in living soil, as the vast majority of the industry doesn't. Most people are running through drip irrigation or some sort of modified system off of that. A lot of them like to use things that are dosatron-like or Anderson unit-like systems that allow them to have more of a automated hands-off consistency in their feeding. So they're looking for specific types of liquids that can be run through, or solubles that can be put into a liquid form, like a wettable soluble powder, that can be put into a large reservoir tank and then run out into these multiple rooms. So when you're looking at that type of a system, there's products that are being put on the market that are, there's sort of like a few different categories. There's what I would say is like the microbial biostimulants, which are things that are basically sort of replicating or trying to replicate like what you and I would look at in our living soil system, where we're increasing the active biology and we're promoting that biology, providing it food sources, providing it structure in a natural farming sense, providing actual inoculations of indigenous microorganisms or cultivated microorganisms. Then there's also the sort of hormonal extract versions. I would say that you would see things like that, like seaweed extract, kelp extracts, and certain things like people are getting into like sprouted teas and things like that. And then the next step over would be stress inducing. There's actually ones that replicate things such as an attack on the plant, like an insect attack or a pathogenic attack on the plant, creating a stress response, creating a stimulation of secondary metabolite production. So there's, like I said, sort of a couple different forms. And I mean, you can even consider that, humic acids and fulvic acids, which are just natural acid forms, amino acids, can also be considered a biostimulant. So there's a handful of different ones. Now, viscosity plays a large role in that. So that does limit a lot of the microbial ones. And you don't want to produce large amounts of biofilm in your irrigation systems or in your holding tanks. So you have to be really targeted with what type of biostimulant you're going to choose and what specific effect you're looking to gain, because you don't want to run them all the time. There's some that you can utilize pretty consistently, like microbial, but like targeted stress, you want to do at very specific points in time. And things like a nutritional, like the kelp meal, or an enzymatic or hormonal, again, you're going to want to be targeted. You're not going to want to be juicing it every day. Our bodies don't produce mass amounts of hormones every day. They produce what we need to get by, and occasionally a boost of it can give us a real jump start. But putting undue stress on the plant by taking it too far out of its comfort zone and too far out of its natural operating sphere can have unintended epigenetic effects. And then you can have things happen in the plant's expression that you weren't looking for.
Yeah, definitely. Like a plant only has a certain amount of energy to allocate to each process. You tell it to focus too much on a particular process, it can't focus it on another process, like yield.
Yep, absolutely.
To protect against pests over and over and over again, then you're not going to get the yield potentially if you're overusing it, right?
It's all about balance, finding a sweet spot where everything sits together in stasis and in homeostasis.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some specific examples that work in these systems like dosatrons, and people who are listening, like they're looking for things that are run through irrigation? What do you recommend when you're out there in the field?
So I do try to stay away from making product recommendations. Okay. That said, there are some good companies out there. I mean, I'm a big fan of Fish Shit. I'm a big fan of Impella Bioscience. It's got some good products out there. But again, I am a natural farmer and a regenerative person. So in general, when I'm working with a client, if they don't want to go the natural farming way, I'll allow them to bring different products to the table that they're interested in. Because whenever they're looking for something, there's never been a grower that's come to me that's like, I want to try something, but I haven't looked into it at all. They always come to you with a list of products that they're already interested in, they're looking at. And then I'll give them guidance from my experience based off of what they want to bring to the table. And then if they really do press, I'll give them one. I think, if one of the things I would recommend was not in their initial selection, then I do recommend something. But Impella Bioscience produces some really solid ones. Lactobacilli is phenomenal. Bavaria bassiana is excellent. Mycorrhizal fungi, of course. And what else? this shit's a big one that I'm a fan of, I have to say. And it's not just because they're near me. I actually met them when they first started their company, and I found out their farm was at the top of my street. And
Oh, nice.
I was really surprised, but I've tried the product and I have really enjoyed it. It's not a be all end all. I think that they're all unique and should be used at specific points of time, again, for specific targeted effects. But labs is always something that's good to have in your soil, especially if you're running in one of those systems where you've got no biology. I mean, really any living biology that you can get into your soil, if it's a soilless system, is really important. But again, diversity is key. Don't just dump in one single thing and hope for the best. Provide a plethora that you can. Do your little bit of research, go on Google Scholar, see what's good symbiotic microbes, and see what's on the market that's available. But I would also recommend check some podcasts. There's been some good ones on Tad Hussey's Kiss Organics about people actually doing lab testing of specific products. Not every product has what it says it has in it.
Yeah. A lot of these things that you're suggesting will leave residual in some of these systems, right? So are you recommending enzymes for cleaning out? Do you have any recommendations on specific enzymes?
Yeah, so post running anything, you want to do a water flush. So you need to build that into your protocol, because you're going to want to clean out your irrigation line. So your main feed line that runs from your tank to your systems and your rooms is one thing. Then from there, you have your splits that's going to go into your actual rooms, feed down towards your benches. Then you're going to have your whips that go to your benches. Then you're going to have your feed lines across the table, and then your drip emitters into your bags. So it's really important that you understand that when you're determining how much feed volume you're going to give, that you're incorporating a flush. That should be at least about a quarter of what you're running. 25% of what you're running should be a clean water flush at the end as a good practice. And that just needs to be incorporated into how much you're providing as far as a feed. You can run lower depending on the system. I've seen some systems that run it, 10% water flush at the end. And then we do an occasional enzymatic cleaner, though, depending on which enzymatic cleaner you use, labs is a great option again. We, however, at the end of every cycle, run a heavy sanitation through the entire line and out into that room, through the whips, through the feed lines, through the individual drip emitters onto the table, and then scrub all the tables down and clean them. And then run a sanitation cleanser after that and a water after that to make sure. You never want to leave sanitizer in your lines after. I'm a sustainability guy and I love the environment and nature, but run a couple extra gallons if you're not sure that you've got all that sanitizer out, because I've watched clients fry an entire room because there was bits of sanitizer left in the lines. You could literally see it as it worked its way down the table because of where the pressure first started from, and you could just see the plants dying off.
Oh no.
So these are all in pots. So you're talking about systems where people are growing in pots.
For the most part, that's what I see in most facilities these days, is people running in pots or in Rockwell cubes, though I don't really deal much with the Rockwell cubes anymore. I'm not really working in salt as much. I do have some clients, but most of what I'm doing is people that are trying to do a hybrid organic style, where they're trying to be operating in the systems that they understand in sort of the turn and burn method and resetting the room each time and working with media and fertigation and dosing, versus a living soil where they're running in very, very large scale beds. Very, very large scale pots, like 100, 200 gallon, or even like 50 gallon, or running in large beds like 4x8s and up. But most people at this point, the major operators that I'm working with, are running in pots of varying sizes.
So what I'm hearing, or first thing that comes to mind to me, is that a lot of people are kind of starting to recognize the implications or the unique effects, the higher quality of organic grown or organic input contributing flour, right? So people have been growing with salts for a long time, and now we're seeing people try to do hybridized methods where people are trying to get those increased yields, but also get that different flavor, that different effect,
Exactly.
And people who smoke organic cannabis really know the difference between, pump and dump high salt hydroponic weed and like an organic grown flour. It's a really drastic difference if you really know the flour. And so it sounds to me like the industry is kind of redirecting itself to
It's maturing.
It's definitely like people are starting to know. The market is demanding almost this different quality of flour that smokes better, tastes better, feels like, not so much like a drug, like hydro, like really pump and dump hydro.
Less narcotic.
Yeah, it feels narcotic. It doesn't feel good. I just kind of get weird and anxious, but when I smoke like organic flour, it actually feels like medicine to me. So what I'm hearing is that these large scale operators are trying to find different ways to maximize their yields, keep like a really consistent, predictable regimen while integrating these different compounds that boost flavonoid pathways and different secondary metabolites that create wider profiles of aromas and therapeutic effects, right?
Yeah.
So I know you were saying that you don't like to recommend specific products. You had mentioned fish it, which is almost like a aquaponic type product, right? So, so you have like a lot of those nitrogen fixing bacteria, a lot of fish amino acids. People are starting using like kelp a lot. What about like specific phytohormones? Are you seeing people using specific phytohormones like methyljasminate or like, you know, tricontinol, things like that?
Very, very few. Very,
Very-
very few. There are a couple, and in general, I find that they're the people that are actually already more into the living soil scene. They've usually got at least a portion of their facility, or they're doing it at home, and that's what's gotten them into that sort of realm of understanding more of like phytochemistry options. But no, the general operators that I'm seeing in the industry don't have any knowledge of that being a thing yet. And when you start to explain it to them, some of them are on board, and some of them are very like, I don't know about that yet.
Okay. So are you seeing an increase? So I'm okay. Let me back up. So a lot of the industry, the industry just isn't testing for a lot of these other compounds like thiols and sulfur compounds that kind of produce the larger aroma profile. But are you seeing a different profile in terpene expression and cannabinoid expression compared to this salt-based, and in an organic hybrid program?
Yeah, no, without question. So very, very high level rudimentary, sort of like not getting into nitty gritty. But when I think about salts, hybridized, and then living soil, sort of as a spectrum, I would say salts, you're always going to get your highest yields. You're going to get rapid growth, extremely high yields, and often very, very high THC production. I do find that you get more limited cannabinoid profiles, and though you can push really quite solid percentages of terpenes, they're again limited to a few dominant terpenes, not anywhere near the plethora of complexity that we see. So then you get into the middle of the road, which is like your hybridized methods of varying style. And there you start to see still pretty comparable yields, potentially like slightly less depending on what regimens you're running it and how well you're running it. And you'll also start to see potentially a slight drop of a few percentages of THC. You might not be pulling down 32s to 35s. You'll be in the high 28s and 30s. But you do start to see.
Oh, sorry. Why do you think that is?
So what I think it is that the plant begins to have more options available to it of nutrition and of these, specific either stimulants and or enzymes or hormones or just molecules of nutrition that it can utilize and create much more complex chains. So like when we think about food, I work in the ag industry as well. When we talk about food, like the sweet corn that's organic and the sweet corn that's conventional, the sweet corn that's organic is much sweeter, like considerably sweeter. And the only reason that would be is that the plant is utilizing something differently to create a higher concentration of the same compound and also a diversity of similar compounds. So I think in cannabis, it's the same thing. The closer that we get to having a larger diversity of both microbiology and therefore endophytes, and having a diversity of amino acids available or different types of acids available in the soil, different hormones and enzymes, and having the nutritional component there, we give the plant all of the building blocks that it needs to be able to achieve its genetic potential. Now, you as a grower still need to be able to grow it to its genetic potential. You need to be able to provide it the proper stresses, the proper environment of cultivation, the proper watering setup and all that. But your care aside, it's what's the plant going to do. And that's going to be purely genetic, provided you remove those other factors by providing everything that it needs as best as you can. So I think that the complexity that we see, again, you see a much larger jump when you get into living soils. I've seen living soil flower with terpene profiles of over 20 to 25 different terpenes. And I've seen a percentage as high as 9.5%. But I've seen salt pulling down 40% THC and like 43% TAC. I've never seen that in living soil, but I've seen high 30s. So the other thing is that I think that the industry is starting to mature and we're starting to move away from just THC and moving towards actual TAC, total active cannabinoid profile, and how much diversity is within that profile. Because if you've got 30% TAC and you've got 29% THC, then there's only 1% of other cannabinoids. But if you've got like 25% THC or 22% THC but 30% TAC, you've got a plethora of other cannabinoids in there in very viable phytochemical ratios to actually have a chemical effect on your body, to have a physiological and phytochemical effect. So that's where people are starting to realize and experience that there's more to the experience with the higher with the higher diversity and higher concentration versus just higher concentration of select chemicals.
It's almost like the plant has like a certain amount of compounds that it can uptake at a time. And when you're doing completely sterile, no other, compounds other than salt-based nutrients, it'll take in only those salt-based nutrients to create yield. But when you introduce other things, the plant will decide to take in other compounds and not so much, maybe like the salt-based nutrients. Like there's only so much the plant can uptake. So they have to kind of sacrifice one for the other.
I think that there's also something to be said for the symbiotic relationship between the microbiology and the plant itself that creates different chemistry and different responses within the plant. Because even when you take a pure salt system and you jack in some microbes, you see a substantial jump. You see a tangible difference. Now, the nutrition is the same, and the nutrition that you're providing to the plant essentially at that point is already all bioavailable as long as you've got a really good nutrient line. It should be very bioavailable to that plant. So the microbes really don't have as much of a role to play. So then what is actually happening there? What synergy and relationship and symbiotic experience is happening between these microbes and this plant beyond just the microbes going into the soil, foraging for nutrition, bringing it back and trading it to the plant for glucose and carbs? So there has to be something more complex that's going on there. And that's where I think it starts to play a role.
Yeah,
and that's why I think that the biology increasing in living soil in a hybrid system and then in living soil further increases that potential reaction. Sorry, not to cut you off.
No. Finish what you're saying. I just agree. I agree what you're saying, but I feel like in my mind, the way I think about it is that plants, they've been around for 250 million years. They have to communicate, right? And so terpenes are that communication source. And so when you have that diversity of organisms, what they're doing is that they're exchanging these phytohormones and chemicals and compounds to increase because they need to communicate, and they're talking with one another essentially. And when you have like jasmonic acid increased and salicylic acid increased from these different organisms, that's a signaling pathway to trigger the production of other secondary metabolites. And so it's like you're saying, a symbiotic relationship that we can hardly even, we
don't understand.
We don't, but there's papers that we can see exogenous applications of this jasmonic acid or the methyl jasmonates, and it will increase within the plant, and it will start increasing other secondary metabolites because it's just that communication of like, hey, like I'm here, you're here, we have this relationship, we've been evolving together for 250 million years. And so it's like you can grow a plant with just the food that it needs, but is it going to express itself fully? And expression is what? Communication, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of how I think of it.
100%.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I would also say that there's something that, we're beginning to understand the epigenetic influences of our environment to the aerial parts of the plant, the above ground portions of the plant. But we really have almost no understanding of epigenetic influences within the root zone. And you can't tell me that having like the research that Dr. James White has done, that he presented at the Organic Cultivators Conference this past year. And he was talking about how they have actually got visual video through microscopy of what we had originally thought was that basically your root tips went out and the microbes came up to the root tip, and that they communicated by, like chemicals at first. We thought just within touching each other. And then we thought, okay, no, they make physical contact and they make some sort of direct exchange. His research is actually now showing the microbe, let's say it's a bacterial cell, will come up to the cellular wall of the root. The cellular wall of the root will actually envelop it, and then superoxide is exuded and it dissolves the actual exterior cellular wall of the bacteria, and a antioxide is put around it to encapsulate its RNA DNA and keep it safe. The plant takes the nutrients that it had requested from the microbe when it went out foraging, reprograms the DNA of that microbe, re-encapsulates it within its cellular wall, and then exudes it back out through its cellular wall into the soil. So we've essentially learned that they're not just communicating, the plants actually are directly reprogramming the DNA, RNA of the microbes to get what they want. Instead of being a communication of like, hey, I need phosphorus, it reprograms it to want phosphorus.
Wow, yeah, that is amazing. That is
Yeah.
really, really cool.
So you're absolutely right. Like they are communicating, like serious, like intimate soul communication, like at the DNA level.
I saw some study on pine trees. I think maybe I talked with you about this, Luna, but it just fascinates me because the pine trees have the relationship with the mycorrhizal fungi, and when they get attacked by bark beetles, they increase beta caryophyllene, and then the fungal network increases beta caryophyllene, and then it sends it out through the entire mycelial network so that all the other trees know,
all the other trees get guarded.
There's bark beetles coming, like let's prepare, and it's just so freaking cool.
Yeah, the ectomycorrhizal fungi that are within pine trees are crazy. It's a whole subset of the mushroom kingdom. Like we think about our mycorrhizal fungi that we're utilizing to like glomular for cannabis and for vegetable production and fruit production, but the ectorhizals that are working for the pine trees is just so cool.
It is. It's really cool. There's like pines that they tried to grow in Puerto Rico, and they would bring them down from South Carolina, I think, or North Carolina, and they wouldn't grow. They wouldn't grow. They were bare root though. And finally, they brought them over with soil from the native, and it had that mycorrhizal fungi, and they finally lived. It was like, you can't.
Yeah, they brought an inoculum with it.
That's incredible. Yeah, I heard one time that I think it was just like a funny analogy. I don't remember where I heard it. But that if aliens were to come down and analyze the most used language on the planet, that the language would be terpenes. Yeah. Because all bacteria and all plants, they communicate to each other through terpenes. They tell each other the warning signs, where nutrients are, where to go, where's food, where's danger, where we can host and feed and multiply. And it's all through terpenes. It's the most used language on the planet.
Absolutely.
I love that.
And the most
like goosebumps.
Right? That's not fun.
And it's absolutely the most complex if you think about it as well. I mean, you think about in human language, right? I believe Chinese Mandarin has the most individual potential like characters and creations, like words basically. And then there's over 20,000 registered terpenes. Show me one language in the world with 20,000 different words, right? Completely unique words.
And they're in profiles too. It's not like one character. It's like a full assembly of these profiles of terpenes to communicate. It's like we can't fathom that. We don't operate on that complex level. It's just so amazing. We think of our lower life forms as not as advanced as us. Like I feel like the earth and nature communicates through fungi and bacteria in such a more advanced way than we give it credit. I think it's much smarter.
Yeah, no, we're primordial.
Yeah, right. We're the ignorant, arrogant ones in the corner.
Yep. Well, I always say that one of the greatest things you can do as a cultivator, or really as a human, is to remove your hubris, to step back and be humble and appreciate and observe. Like everything, in my opinion, basically needs to start with observation. Everything. Because until you understand how a system is operating, you really have no business deciding how you could change that system or influence that system or have the hubris to believe you could improve that system.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think, yes. I think that like old growth forests, systems like that are established that haven't been disturbed, 100%. But I do think that sometimes when we're trying to fix the problems that we created, I think that we can improve them. But
yeah, that's different. I'm talking like natural cycles.
We're not going to go into an old growth forest and be like, you know what this needs?
Yeah,
this
when you see a fire, don't disturb it. Fire out.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
There are times to react and there are times to observe.
So what we're saying here, everybody listening, is that you should be growing with microbes in as much of an organic system that's incorporating these natural systems, that's incorporating all of the things that plants do naturally, that if you just grow with just salts, you're not going to get the full expression of the plant. But I think most people listening probably already do that.
Yeah, terpenes is definitely my love language.
Oh, I love it.
Awesome. Ben, so have you ever heard of anyone growing in like living soil beds using salts?
So yes and no. I have heard. I know somebody that I'm working with a bit, doing some crazy mad sciencey stuff, not production, just research and development. I'm a tinkerer and a dabbler, and I like to prove things right or wrong myself. Though I take advice from those that I've learned deep amounts from. I still like to try. And so we're doing living soil bed 4x8, and we're utilizing salts, specific single molecule salts at specific points in time to try to provide very targeted doses of specific nutrients, macro and micronutrients, sort of to try to be a stimulant in some extent, a biostimulant to some extent, or not even necessarily a biostimulant, but you've eaten your 3 meals for the day, but you're trying to bulk up, so you have a protein shake too. So there's certain points in time, specific targeted times, that we are trying to see if doing a single or a week-long application of one of these solubles or of a handful of blended solubles has a tangible effect both on yield, quality, and profile, but also on the microbiology. So I have a microbiometer, and we will take measurements before, during, and after of the microbiological content, fungal and bacterial, to be able to understand, are we doing damage to the microbiology by providing this salt-based nutrient, essentially robbing them of being, because one of the big reasons that we get dead farmland is that if you provide salt-based nutrients, this is why salt-based people always do turn and burns, because you can't run continuously in the same soil over and over again without providing nutrition and microbiology. And if you rototill a field and use Roundup and use salt-based nutrients for your cornfield, after a certain point in time, you start getting diminishing returns. You're adding more and more nutrition, and you're getting less out of it because there's such a loss of microbiological content there. So that comes from the fact that, rototilling is deadly to microbes, specifically to fungi, but it's detrimental to bacteria, but they pop back real fast. And that's why weeds come back first, is that weeds like bacterially rich soils. But in this type of an instance, what we're looking at is, are we robbing that relationship to an extent where microbes are dying off and we're losing microbial mass by sort of skipping the line and giving the kids at the dinner table? So like the analogy that I use for salts and for organic is, you've got a family. The plants are your children. The parents are the microbes. The parents go grocery shopping, and they come back and they cook the food and they feed it to the children. In response, they get love. Now, the food in them going grocery shopping is the microbes going through the soil matrix, gathering the individual microbes that they need. Cooking is them digesting and making it bioavailable, essentially, or them converting it and making it bioavailable to the plant. And then the love that they get back is the sugar. We call it cakes and cookies, the sugar and carbohydrates that they are given in exchange and exudates from the plant. Now, salt-based nutrients are takeout, Chinese and pizza. Now, at first, when you dump mom and dad's cooking on the table and pizza and Chinese food, well, the kids get double down. They're getting all the food that they can possibly eat. But after a while, mom's cooking, a little old, and the Chinese is easy. It's right there. The pizza's so fast. It's right there. It's the convenience of having that salt-based nutrient right there, ionized, already ready to go, already chelated or chelated, ready for the plant's uptake. Well, after a while, mom and dad stop getting love because their food's not getting eaten. When they stop getting love, they disappear. They leave. So that's the microbes essentially are dying off because they're no longer being fed in this exchange, because the plants are no longer needing to exchange exudates with them because they're getting the nutrition that they need directly ionized and through chelation. So that's the analogy that I use, and that's where sort of we're trying to measure with this method or this test, this experiment. Can we do this in a way that is not only beneficial to our end goals for production of the plant, but is not detrimental to the environment and the microbiology that we're working with trying to cultivate?
First of all, that's a really sad analogy. I would be super sad if my parents just left because I didn't eat their food.
But it kind of works, right? It's a complex idea that you're trying to translate to people.
Yes, I love it. What have you found then? What has your microbiometer been telling you?
I cannot release that yet. We don't have enough data.
Oh, the proprietary information.
No, not proprietary. Okay. Simply, I don't like to make a statement until I have enough data to really back it.
Okay, I respect that.
It's the
Can I get a
scientific.
sneak
I originally
peek?
started in
All right.
nursing and doing
I will-
emergency medicine. So everything was like, you don't
You're
make a statement until you are sure, and you are sure when you've got enough data in multiple sets that you can back it up. So
Okay, you got to come back when and it's time to release that stuff, man, because I want to know.
Yeah, for real.
I
I've
promise
been
you guys will
thinking
be
about
first
doing
to
the
know.
same thing. I've been thinking about experimenting and playing with just different salt-based additions because I've been struggling with this phosphorus, the bat guanos, the unsustainability of some of these organic mined minerals, and I talked
So
to a lot of different. Go ahead.
I got a little note I can give you on that.
Okay. Yes.
Phosphorus and lunamite like this because sulfur as well. Now, this does not work if you're in production. If you're under state regulation, this is not something that you can do most likely because they're very selective in what they allow you to use for nutrition, depending on what state you're in. But phosphoric and sulfuric acid is something that is often used as a pH adjuster for your water. Now, there was some anecdotal things that we had seen. If you are using phosphoric acid for a pH adjustment in your water and or as a foliar application, it provides very high amounts of bioavailable phosphorus and sulfur to your plant. Like really high amounts was what we found. And we were like really concerned at first because we didn't understand why our soil test was coming back with such high levels of phosphorus and sulfur when we weren't adding that much. And it was because they were using phosphoric sulfuric acid as a pH adjuster.
It's also a stabilizing agent in a lot of those organic products.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to have it at high enough levels that it's which it usually isn't as a stabilizer.
I'm sorry, what?
I said you have to get it in high enough levels, which it usually isn't in the as a stabilizer in a lot of products. The amount that they use doesn't have the effect that you would see if you're trying to use it as an actual nutrition.
Even if it's being like continuously added, like in these.
I mean, yeah, it'll be used up, but it's not something that you could use in place of phosphorus or in place of a phosphorus additive. So it's not like if you've got a handful of different inputs and two of them have phosphoric acid or sulfuric acid as a stabilizer, that'll replace how much phosphorus you would need to provide your plants for them to grow properly. It will benefit and supplement. It's going to be there and it's going to be used, but it's not necessarily enough for the plant to actually just go off of on its own.
Cool. Good enough.
Interesting. Some of these rules that different states have, there's so many different ways around and loopholes and things like that. I've heard of, like in California, you weren't, I don't know if it was statewide, I think so, that you couldn't use sulfur as IPM spray, but you could use it for foliar feeding.
Foliar spray, yep.
It's like, what? That's the
you
same
can't
thing,
use it
but...
as a pesticide, but you can use it as a nutrient.
Yes, so that was like.
Now it just so happens that I had aphids when I decided to give a phosphorus, sulfur feed, but
when I was foliar spraying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but it's not what I was using it for. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that. Another one you could think about is in natural farming. WCAP, water soluble calcium phosphate, is a really, really viable method. And for like easy extraction, it's not super crazy high, but I mean you get concentrations of dilution to reach what you're looking for as far as actual ppms of phosphorus. But you essentially just take large animal bones and char them down till they crack, and then put them in an acid extraction of vinegar, and you get water soluble calcium phosphate. Again, not something that you can 100% replace your phosphorus regimen with, but if you're able to supplement with a handful of different methods of phosphorus addition, then you can be a little bit more sustainable versus just going for a bat guano or a seabird guano.
Cool.
Have you ever seen any like test results on products like that, like homemade products like that?
Only anecdotal evidence.
Right. It's conceptual, right, and makes sense. But I'm just curious, like what the
I would love to do it. On the list of my things to send out for testing and experiments to run. Right. It's not a large enough portion right now of my day-to-day work for me to be able to dedicate the time that I want to it.
So what about like micronized minerals?
Yeah.
Any
micronization, the larger the surface area that you can create, the more bioavailable a nutrient is going to be in a smaller amount of time. So the more you micronize, the closer you're going to be able to, or not closer, but the more you're able to reduce the timeline of readily available. That actually goes to one of the points that you and I were talking about earlier with like nanoization of particles. So like there's companies that like most nutrition, most fertilizer companies, especially in like the organic realm, not so much in salts, but in the organic realm, they run through like 1,000 to 2,000 micron filtration, and as far as particle size, and that's pretty small as far as what we're looking for when we're just diluting something into a large tank and then hand feeding or feeding from a dram or something like that. But it's not great for when you're doing things like dosatrons or Anderson units. But when you have something that's micronized to say sub 100, then you've got things that are actually reaching nanoparticle levels, and they're able to get to such a small microscopic level that you can emit them through basically anything as far as your systems, but also through spray heads and nozzles for foliars. They're really, really great at creating small droplet size. And they're also able to, on contact with the surface of the tissue, be actually able to penetrate through the cellular wall directly into the plant. So like you and I were talking a little bit about carbon-based fertilizers that are highly micronized and their ability to provide carbon directly to the cells versus having to go through like respiration, the plant inhaling CO2, expending energy that it received through photosynthesis to be able to break that CO2 bond through the redox, and then having to take that having now take that carbon and oxygen, breathe the oxygen back out, and then mobilize the carbon to where it wants it. You can literally provide a tissue foliar to the whole plant, hitting almost all of the surface area of the aerial parts of the plant, providing direct carbon to it. So now not only does it not have to expend energy mobilizing that carbon to where it needs it to be for cellular production, it doesn't have to expend the energy to break that carbon down from a less readily available source, and you're able to do it within the cell itself. So you're actually even able to even eliminate the short path of it going from like the exterior to the interior, because you're applying it directly to the exterior of the cell, and it doesn't have like that thick of a cell wall, unless you're growing like some of the massive plants that you do outside where you get like a 4-inch diameter stalk. Then yeah, there's a good amount of space for it to go from the outside of that stalk to the inside. But it's really interesting to see how that's starting to become a thing with certain brands, and the responses that they're getting from it.
Yeah, I've been playing with micronized calcium lately. It's pretty cool.
What have you been finding?
I mean, the plants love it. Calcium is just such a crucial part of cell function, cell development, cell wall building, and same with amino acids. So I've been combining amino acids and micronized calcium together, and doing foliar applications. And I'm just seeing, like I don't have any problems with trigger pressure, but it's just even better.
Even more.
Right? Even more. And some of my pots have some old soil in them. And I've been, really working on bringing them back to life, and I've been making content about bringing soil back to life and reintroducing nutrients and stuff like that. But I'm still finding that they just need like that extra kick. And sometimes, foliar applications are good to get past issues that, nutrient uptake issues in the soil. Sometimes just hitting it with a foliar application, especially in micronized form, like how you were saying, the plant doesn't have to expend energy to use these elements, these compounds. They just take it directly into the cell wall. And amino acids are, great for this. Amino acids serve that function also. And so do, micronized inputs like micronized calcium. And amino acids and calcium, that's what produces a lot of our different volatile compounds, our flavonoid compounds. They're the building blocks for so many different things inside of our plants and expressions within our plants. So every other night I've been out there spraying my plants with this stuff, and they're just rocking. They love it. It's a part of my regimen that will stick around. Like I don't always make changes and then keep them forever. Like I like to play with stuff, and sometimes I keep things, sometimes I don't. The foliar application of micronized calcium and amino acids is definitely here to stay.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking to that, I actually think that you are 100% right. And I'm actually seeing individual brands now that are doing the vast majority of their nutrition through foliars. And I think that that's a really interesting concept, especially when we're talking about living soils. One of the only real major drawbacks of living soils is that you do have to constantly be adding amendments to the soil. And that can lead to certain things having toxic buildups of either heavy metals or sodium or any number of things. So the ability to provide a good amount of targeted nutrition, and specifically like individual types of targeted nutrition to the plant foliarly versus having to feed it into the soil, not only are we skipping a portion of the plant's expenditure of energy, but we're also putting less undue stress on the soil because, I mean, however much I love living soil, let's be honest, the way that we run cannabis's soil is almost abusive to the soil as far as like what we demand of it on just a continuous basis. And just it's as soon as we can stack it, we're running it again. And then as soon as we can bring it back, we're running it again. And I think that we could ease off a little bit and allow it to be a bit more of a natural soil cycle and a little bit more of a natural nutritive cycle by getting that extra push that we need as cannabis growers versus standard food growers or, you know, farmers produce or anything like that.
I'd say speak for yourself, indoor man. Outdoor, you let the soil cycle through winter.
That's
cover
totally
crop,
different.
Covering.
Totally different. Totally different because you've got all these external factors that influence your soil that you can't get indoors. We don't have rainstorms. We don't have barometric pressure changes like that. We don't have heavy winds and animals that
fall. You know, you don't have leaves falling on the ground and decomposing over wintertime.
Absolutely. Yeah, my outdoor beds, no, straight living soil. And they're 5 years running and happy as hell. But as far as indoor systems, yeah, I mean, we're creating an unnatural natural environment and we're demanding round after round from it. Usually not a lot of, I mean, there are some growers that allow, you know, fallow periods and they allow downtime for their beds to live, cycle, and come back online. But most producers at this point in time, we're paying by square footage. And unless you've got enough square footage to store beds out of production rooms and rotate fresh beds in, you have to be on that cycle of constant turn and burn, or not turn and burn, but like constantly turning the system, which demands a lot more of the soil. And I think that we could alleviate some of that pressure potentially by providing a lot of the extra nutrition that we need through foliar.
Interesting. I just wrote a paper for Seedsman on foliar feeding, and when I was doing some research for it, because I love foliar feeding. I'm a huge proponent, but I started to play devil's advocate, you know, and just pull up other research papers. And one that caught my attention was that basically, depending on the ionic charge of the nutrient being applied, that the leaf surface actually has a charge itself, and so that some of those larger molecules will adhere to the leaf surface and actually not become very mobile within the plant. And so you have to be careful about specifically, I guess, what you're using for foliar.
Absolutely. And not just what you're using as far as the product, but how you're applying it. Droplet size is incredibly important. So like when we're talking about micronization, the reason that the smaller particle size is better is because of increased surface area and decreased surface tension. So when we have large droplet sizes and large particle sizes within that droplet, we're really just coating our plants. We're not feeding them. And that can actually be highly detrimental depending on what you're spraying on your plants. You've now created a layer that not necessarily nice microbes can live and thrive in. So you need to be careful of that. And you also need to be careful of what time you're applying your foliars. Like there's an entire art to foliar application. It's not like you can just be like nutrients, pump sprayer, outside. It's not that simple. There's definitely an art form to it and a science. And I would say that, you know, what you're spraying, being aware of whether it is abiotic or biotic, and whether, like, because that determines what type of equipment you need to use. You can't be forcing biotic things like microbes through highly micronized screens or through piston pumps or through turbine pumps. It'll just shred them. You need to use things like diaphragm pumps or Venturi systems, where if you're spraying micronized calcium and amino acids, you can run an atomizer and then you can get really phenomenal droplet size. So you need to be aware of targeted application, what you're using, its micronization size, and then what you're applying in its droplet size. So there's a handful of things that you need to consider before you just start going and spraying stuff on your plants.
What's your preferred surfactant?
Depends what I'm using.
Okay.
I'm very much the type of person where I believe that, like, I don't like one size fits all. That's why, like, if a client ever asks me, like, can you just give me like SOPs for something? I'd be like, no, because every SOP is unique to their facility, to their grower, to their method, to like where Mercury is in retrograde. Like, it's all important and it's all selective. So there is no one size fits all in the life of a farmer. And so I don't feel like there's a one size fits all in that either. That said, I like yucca quite a bit.
Yucca?
Everybody listening,
Yeah,
I've
sorry,
got yucca on my website.
It's been a long
you guys
day.
want it?
It's 10 o'clock here. and I've been working since then.
Oh, awesome. Cool.
Yeah, I like to use
That's
yucca
mine.
too.
Yeah, what is one of your favorites beyond that one?
Who you talking to?
Either one of you, both of you.
Well, I usually just use yucca because I sell it, but
Aloe vera is
Yeah,
is
I
my
was about to say aloe.
yeah.
You ever played with fermented aloe?
I have fermented aloe before. So when there's like specific plant inputs that have like very specific phytochemical profiles that I'm looking for, I don't like to ferment them because the fermentation process will convert specific organic acids into other organic acids.
Absolutely.
And a lot of the times we don't know what they are unless we're using like a chromatograph, which I definitely don't have.
Don't
and
have.
I'm
If you
or
get one,
someone
let me know.
use. Yeah, right. The extra when I have an extra $100,000, I'll buy one. And come over
We
and
should
use
just
it.
pull together from all of us and just get one so that we can actually start doing these tests, like how much phosphorus is in WACP, or CAP.
Exactly.
Well, why can't we get a sponsor? Come on,
Man.
labs.
Labs? Yeah, we need a lab to just send us a chromatograph so we can test what organic compounds
Or
are.
better yet, we
That
need a
fermented
lab
aloe
that'll
vera.
let us just send them samples.
That's what I'm saying. A sponsored lab that just is like, yeah, we want to support the
You
education.
find the
and we love
sponsor,
it.
put me in front of them, and I'll see what I can do to make it happen. I'm a good talker.
God, that would be
I
so
think that me and
cool.
Luna could do some convincing.
But yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Let's go get them. Whenever I do like any kind of fermentation, it's usually for like nutrition, right? For like nutrient content, like making like fermented plant extracts. I've kind of leaned away from making FPJs quite a bit, just because I think that the science for nutrition content for nutrient content makes more sense with like lactobacillus breakdown, or even just like soaking in like an acidic water.
Mm-hmm.
So no, to answer your question,
water as far as pH,
3.5.
3.5. So
3.5. Yeah.
You're talking vinegar level.
Yeah, I'm talking. Yeah, exactly. So there's a whole bunch of research papers. I can send you some talking about extracting organic acid with acidic water, and that being like the standard practice, like the industry standard for extracting organic acids and phytohormones. And it's not with osmotic extraction. And I'm not trying to shit on KNF at all. That is not my intention. But that's what the industry standard is for extracting phytohormones. Is acidic water, and then they use other processes, different like distillation and solvents and stuff like that, which I'm not getting into because it's just not my style. But so that's kind of what I've been playing with if I'm trying to go after like organic acid profiles. But if I'm using fermentation, it's typically for nutrient content because there's a lot of information surrounding lactobacillus breakdown for releasing nutrients. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I've been sticking to. So if I have like an input like aloe vera, which we can look up the phytochemical profile of and see that it has a lot of like beneficial compounds like salicylic acid, like a big amino acid profile. I try not to run it through different biological sources. Like I try not to ferment it. So like you'll see in my teas, I'll add it like post brew because I don't want those compounds to change, because I don't want them to be something I don't know what they are. And if I want to use them for a very specific growth stage or for a very specific reason, I want to know what I'm using. So no, I don't ferment. I don't ferment stuff as much when I'm playing around with like organic acids and things. But
I actually just make my fermented aloe and I eat it.
You eat it?
Oh.
Yeah, it's
that's
delicious.
Great. Oh, for food, like that sounds great. How are you fermenting it?
Just traditional natural farming methodology, osmotic pressure, standard microbes that are on my aloe when I cut it up.
So like FPE or FPJ?
Yep, basically FPJ style, and then strain and drain and mix it. That sounds yummy. It's delicious.
Yeah, a lot of brown sugar.
It's like an aloe syrup, and it's great if you put it in carbonated water with a little bit of ginger.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah, I eat a lot of natural farming inputs. As much as I make them for the garden, I make them for me, for sure.
Really?
Yeah.
I've tasted, so I've made like a lot of like raspberry or blackberry FPJ, right? Like premature blackberry FPJ, which even though that's like the one that I'll still use, like bamboo, raspberry, premature apples, premature pears. I'll still make those in FPJ just because I've seen drastic physiological like responses in the plants when using them. Yeah, and even though, like these more premature inputs, they're shown to have high like jasmonic acid levels. Like premature apples definitely do. Like that is a fact. It's been studied. And I don't know whether or not how much of those compounds are remaining in that original form. Fermenting them and using them, the effects are obvious. So I'm not going to say like it still has methyl jasmonate in it, but when using it,
but there's anecdotal evidence that shows that it is effective in some way.
It's doing something, and I think that a lot of the time it's the profile of organic acids, because all organic acids have like phytohormone effects, really, and things that we a lot of the time don't consider to be phytohormones, or the common phytohormones, still have physiological effects on plants, right? And so almost all organic acids are a form of phytohormone, and we have these profiles of organic acids that are huge inside of every plant. Yeah, so it works. I don't know what it is. It's exactly that's doing it.
I don't know why, but it does.
And I know that this works. Oh, sorry, I keep banging my table.
I agree with you. I mean,
organic farming. I'm sorry, what?
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
I was saying I intentionally grow for both my farm and for my family a whole variety of fruits. We grow apples, we grow peaches, nectarines, plums, pears, blackberries, raspberries, golden raspberries, and wineberries. And I ferment both the shoots of all the berries. Like if you ever want something that's just straight delicious, take fresh blackberry or raspberry shoots, the little growing tips, and FPJ that. And it makes such a strong berry flavor, and it's delicious. And you mix that as just like a simple syrup style thing into whatever, water or tea, and you can jazz it up pretty nice.
Very cool. Very cool.
Did you ever make OHN?
Oh yeah, I have.
So I make OHN all the time, but I make extra of the garlic and ginger input, and I use them in cooking all the time.
So I really like OHN. I think OHN is my favorite Korean natural farming input.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff.
It makes the most sense to me. It's an alcohol extraction. It's a solvent extraction. Pulling profiles of phenols and prebiotics to kind of set the stage for like a diversity, right? I'm really big into polysaccharides, polyphenols as prebiotics to like set the stage for biology. And so OHN is like probably my favorite, and it's kind of what inspired me to play around with different profiles of polysaccharides and polyphenols to like set the stage for a diversity of biology.
Nice. Yeah, I have thoroughly enjoyed following your Instagram and watching the amazing scientific madness that ensues, and I think it's phenomenal.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're definitely one of my favorite mad scientists, that's for sure.
Woo!
And I mean, the proof is in the pudding. You look at the work that you've done, and it's like we said with the FPJ, except for with you, we actually know why, because you're a scientist. But it's like it works.
It does. Something's happening, and a lot of the time it's like I don't know exactly why this is happening, and I probably never will. But I can conceptualize why it's happening, and it is in fact happening. So I'm gonna stick to it.
Goes back to what I said at the beginning of it's observation. Everything starts with observation, and we may never understand. I mean, we're highly, highly ignorant of most things, but specifically our microbiology. And so we may never understand why exactly it works or how exactly it works, but we can absolutely observe the efficacy.
100%. We had someone ask what OHN is.
Oriental herbal nutrient. It is a alcohol extraction post fermentation. So first you ferment it for 7 days, and then you would start doing alcohol extractions. It's a number of different inputs. It is 3 dry herbs, which is angelica root, cinnamon bark, and licorice root, and then 2 fresh inputs, which is garlic and ginger. The garlic and ginger you ferment in an FPJ style, and then add alcohol to them after your 7 days, and begin your extraction period of, I believe, about 3 months minimum. And with the dry herbs, you first rehydrate them with beer, very cheap beer, and then ferment them for 7 days, and then provide alcohol as well and do the exact same process. And then at the end, you take all of them and you have them in containers. You mix them in equal ratios according to the recipe that you're following, and then dilute that in water. Or you can drink it yourself. It's also delicious and good for you.
It's a little spicy.
It is. I like it.
Spicy.
It literally is like the epitome as far as smell and taste to me of like ancient Chinese medicine.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I've heard it is. It's like an old ancient Chinese medicine recipe.
Yep.
Oh,
Nice, good share.
what's that? What do you got there? What is that?
It went away
Oh.
before I could click on it.
Crazy. I just shared, somebody asked about jasmonic acid, so I just dropped
Oh.
an article I wrote so that they
Nice.
could read up on it on their own time, what jasmonates are.
How did you do that? I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
You'll have to show me how to do that later.
Yeah, how did you do that?
How did you do that?
I don't know how it appeared on the screen. I have no idea. That must have been behind the scenes Ken.
The wizard.
Okay.
That's what he's there for.
All right, well, I
So-
just grabbed that too because I want to read it.
Cool. Oriental herbal nutrient. I haven't made it yet. It smells delicious. You're talking about like consuming these preparations, and I was told that labs, if I used it, would help with my skin problems. I have eczema really bad, and so I thought that they meant like actually putting it on my eczema. And
Burn? I bet it burned.
oh my god, it burned so
Yeah.
bad, and I diluted it, and I was like, it was way
Oh.
worse.
Ouch. Yeah, you just you basically gave them some fresh skin to start digesting.
Yeah, it was very a high moment.
Yeah, labs are acidic. It's like 3.5.
Yeah,
It's really
it
acidic.
burned.
Yeah, it's
So
it's
don't do
a
that,
high
guys.
bacteria.
Yeah, a lot of lactic acid and bacteria right into. Yeah, that doesn't sound like fun.
Yeah,
I hope
don't
you're
put it
okay.
in your cuts either.
Oh yeah, I'm fine. I've started drinking it though a little bit.
Do you
Yes,
think it's
it's great for digestion.
Oh yeah, it seems like it's helping my digestion. Not so
Yeah,
much. The
Great for
eczema's still there.
digestion and gut
So
health. Well, it may inadvertently, like totally not medical advice, little pre thing, disclaimer, not medical advice, not a doctor. Anecdotally, I have been told that essentially eczema is an autoimmune reaction, and often autoimmune reactions start with lower intestinal gut health, and lactobacilli is good for lower intestinal gut health or just intestinal gut health in general. Therefore, by improving your intestinal gut health, you may inadvertently be, or actually rather directly, but unknowingly be improving your eczema as well.
okay, so I just need to keep on keeping on.
I would also recommend a really high quality CBD topical.
I do use different CBD and cannabis topicals, but it's just only since I've lived in Washington. Washington air, my skin doesn't like it. It's very
Interesting.
weird.
Well, if you want, reach out after, and we still have some products from when I created my company, and we have a phenomenal lotion and salve that are both good for eczema in my own family. They both have over 23 different beneficial botanicals, so they're like a phenomenal product on its own, just holistically, and then also has really high quality full spectrum CBD.
Wow, thank you. I would really like that. So yeah, I'll
Yeah, my
connect with you
pleasure.
afterward. Sweet. Well,
So any more
this has been
questions for
really fun.
Where were we
So
at?
your I read up on you a little bit, and I just thought that your story was really incredible. And I wanted to say I'm so sorry about your father, but that is amazing that you were able to, like, you know, the power, like we're talking about autoimmune, we're talking about our health and the health of our plants, and that's like I think one of our biggest connections here, why we're drawn to this plant, is because of what it has done for our health, whether that's physical, mental, or anything. But I just want to say thank you, and I
No,
appreciate your
my
story.
pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you. I appreciate that. It sucked losing my dad, but I have to say that I think he would be really, really proud of what I've done. And I think that he would, he'd be really happy that he was the catalyst that made me completely change my entire life direction. And I couldn't be happier. I'm helping people. I'm helping to change the world to some extent in my own little way. And I think I'm having a lot more profound impact on the world than I would have if I had just stayed in Western medicine.
I agree. Thank you.
So thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. I do my best. I've had incredible mentors and teachers, and I do my very best, of which one was my father and my grandfather. And I just do my very best to try to live up to those shoes I have to fill. My grandfather was Brown University professor, spoke 7 languages, created the entire concept of the interdisciplinary studies, so having multiple majors and creating your own path. He basically created that for the first time in the world at Brown University. So he's one of their most like recognized professors. And so going now into education myself to some extent has been sort of like a carrying the torch feeling. And it's been really beautiful to be able to carry on both my dad's legacy and my grandfather's legacy, but also forge my own path. And also inadvertently found out while going through my grandfather's possessions that my great grandfather was one of the first cannabis research scientists in Austria, Vienna, at one of the first biological institutes of research. And they were doing animal husbandry and plant breeding, and they were breeding cannabis, specifically hemp, fiber hemp, and doing different measurements. And we found notes that he had and pictures of him standing next to like 15-foot tall cannabis plants with a measuring stick. And so it's kind of cool to find out that not only am I a new generation of educator and hippie of my dad, but I'm also continuing on the family generational thing of growing cannabis, which I never would have expected being a legacy grower.
That's so great.
That's so cool. That is so cool.
Silver linings. It's all that life is about. It's perspective.
And now you're teaching integrated systems, which is kind of like the interdisciplinary, you know? So it's
of cannabis.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's cool. I really appreciate you guys having me on. I've really enjoyed this. Do you have any more questions for me or anything you want to hit on before we wrap up?
So we have some questions from the audience.
Sure. Oh, good.
Kind of roll through some questions.
Excellent. I love these.
That's where I get to jump on and give you a hard time too, you know.
Come on. I always love seeing you.
Should we be using frass?
Oh, insect frass. Great question. So an insect frass is what I would consider one of those stress indicator biostimulants. Essentially what insect frass is it's insect poop and shells. It reacts in the soil as it breaks down, and the plant is under the impression that either A, it is about to be attacked by a lot of insects, sort of like what you had spoke to earlier with the pine trees, and they're increasing the signaling to tell the other pine trees around them that there's an insect attack coming. Be prepared, increase your defenses, create more secondary metabolites to protect yourself. The plant has a very similar response, except not just is it signaling the plants around it, but also it itself is boosting its own defenses to sort of prepare for the invasion, so to speak. But the invasion actually never comes. So you get the benefit of the potentiation of the stressor without ever actually inducing stress within the plant. Like when we do a drought stress to increase metabolites, we are effectively stressing the plant's actual biotic systems to the extent that it has a physiological and chemical response, but you're still going to have to recover from that physiological stress. It still is a dehydrated plant. And you did get that slight reduction in production at that time, but then you get the benefit of the plant's response after the fact. With frass, you're able to get that response without actually having a negative impact. It's also minor nutritional component. So I personally like insect frass quite a bit. Make sure it's high quality. Black soldier fly is really good. And it also never hurts to have black soldier flies in your soil, especially if you're in a living soil system. But be careful, like all things. Whenever you pick a product, sourcing, vet it, test it.
Yep. Don't
just go throwing it into your garden, whatever it is, even if it's something that I've recommended. Batches change, things change, supply change. Vendors don't store things properly often. So never take for granted what is sent to you. Always test it first on a small scale. And if you're a production person, I highly recommend you send it out for third-party lab testing to verify guaranteed analysis.
Oh, no, that was a damn good answer, my friend.
Let me add one thing, though, is that constantly stimulating this plant defense response will take energy away from other processes.
Absolutely.
So continue. So I like to use insect frass like early on, right? But I don't recommend continually using it over and over throughout your cycle, because stimulating that response can take energy away from other processes.
Absolutely agree.
Same with overusing particular hormones.
Yep. I would say any biostimulant needs to be a targeted and temporary use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then we'll go to the next. Alex, do you have something to add?
I just wanted to think about that for a second and think that, so like insect frass it's the chitin that's in the insect frass that is triggering the response, but then like fungal cell walls are made of chitin, so isn't there always like chitin there
No,
always?
No, not necessarily. It's not necessarily the chitin that's triggering that response. It's like we were saying, like the full profile of volatile compounds, like
Yep.
secreted by the biology and by the insects that are still captured within that input.
Yep.
So chitin is a polysaccharide. It's a complex carbohydrate.
Yeah, but it increases like jasmonic acid and other like plant hormones.
Well, it's a component in building those hormones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would also say that there's something to the fact that insect frass isn't just shells; it's also their poop, and their poop, which is broken down biomass of a plant for most of the time when they're being fed, is going to have a secondary response that the plant's going to read as well. It's not just that there's all of a sudden a bunch of shell matter that the chitin is triggering things, but there's also the response of the actual poop itself, and then the potentiation of black soldier fly larvae that are actually coming in that frass as well. I've never gotten a frass that didn't have larvae. I think that a good frass should.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Thinking of it as the whole system.
Yep. But yeah, biostimulants is definitely a TNT. It's big boom in a short time, so temporary and targeted.
Yeah, you want to supply a lot of molecules, but not all at the same time and over, because then you're throwing it out of balance.
Yep, not constant.
Yeah. Are polyphenols like those found in coca useful?
I'm going to turn that to Luna.
So polyphenols just kind of set the stage for what will live in the soil, right? So it's not necessarily that they have specific physiological effects, but they will set the stage for what will exist inside your soil, right? These different energy sources and compounds, they need to have specific biology to break them down, and without them present, that biology won't exist, right? So by introducing a profile of polyphenols, we're allowing for a larger diversity of biology to consume those foods. Same with polysaccharides, which is why I've been in polysaccharides are prebiotics. It's another word for it. A lot of time people just call them sugars, but they're very different from sugars. So these are just things that set the stage for different species of biology to break down. So it's what was the exact question again? Will they?
Oh,
like found in coca useful.
Oh,
yeah.
So adding, you'll just be encouraging a different profile by adding them. And coca has like an interesting like fat profile, and having fats inside your soil is definitely beneficial also. Oh, I didn't get to read the whole thing.
What was that one? Something about manure being sprayed. All the manure sprayed this season with all the rain, lots of water in Ontario is contaminated. Who sprays manure?
Farmers. A lot of farmers up here, especially like Hutterites.
Not broadcast?
Basically, you can spray chicken manure. Which is
just putting it into a liquid suspension and then okay. Sorry, I was picturing people spraying piles of manure, and I'm like, why? Like with labs? Yeah, I mean that's just a really unfortunate thing as far as the environment goes. Runoff is a thing, and it contaminates. So that's why I think it's always very, very important to make sure that whenever you're doing agricultural practices, you are very aware of your waterways, your swales, which directions water will go if you have an excessive amount. There's always a good idea that you can build in swales around your property's low points and then have them feed to a retention pond, so that if you do have catastrophic flooding, rain, or just a really bad irrigation event where they're like a main line of like a 6-inch blows, you'll have all that runoff, but you can catch it in the retention pond and not contaminate your waterways and the rest of your property.
Fantastic advice.
And practices.
Yep. And ladies, anything to add to that? Nope. Okay, then we'll jump to the next question. Okay. Will yucca help clean also? We were talking earlier about cleaning and how many times you were supposed to be cleaning your system, and that's when this question came in.
No, not at all. In fact, it'll make it worse.
Yeah. Don't run it through your blue mat system. That's
No.
for sure.
No, and especially don't run it through expecting it to be a cleaner like an enzymatic cleaner. All you're going to do is create surfaction within your pipelines and create a matrix, a skeleton essentially for a biofilm to build upon.
And you don't want biofilm.
No, biofilm. Actually, I just worked with a facility that had such catastrophic biofilm buildup that they were getting a pH drift of almost 5 points across an 800-foot run.
Ouch.
Yeah. When I went into the facility, we had plants that were like pink and neon purple and like yellow, like you've never seen. I've never seen such an interesting bad rainbow of colors. Like it looked like the most hardcore like fade you've ever seen, but they were in like week 4 or 5 of flower, and it was just everything was fried, and it was because they were running just plain water, not even fertigation, just plain water through the pipes, but it was just picking up such a pH drift and such a biofilm toxicity that it was putting tons of pathogens in their soil. They had completely sterile bags of soil, and they by the week 4 or 5, almost every time, all of them had fusarium.
Oh Jesus! So are you using humic and fulvic to clean the lines at all?
Humic and fulvic, no.
No, I've heard actually that it's supposed to be really good.
To
eat the biofilm.
Potentially, but I've got other enzymatic cleaners that are proven out that I prefer. Also, I'm a big fan of acid cleaning. I'm a fan of like peracetic acid or, like I said, sulfuric phosphoric, but you have to be careful of what acids you use and what your pipes are made of. Plastics are susceptible to many different types of acids, so you need to be aware of what your dilutions are, and you need to be aware of what you're running through them, that it's specifically okay for PVC pipe if that's what you're running through. If you're running through steel, it's a little different.
Yeah.
And then I also
using Schedule 20 or Schedule 40.
Yeah. And I also always recommend to make sure that when you're like building your pipe, it's like a design thing, but when you're creating your irrigation lines, always put bottlenecks in at different set points of whatever piece of mechanical equipment you have to clean. So if you've got a 20-foot pipe cleaner on like a rotary drill, make sure you're putting an inversion pipe every 20 feet or less than every 20 feet so that you can mechanically clean your pipes all the way down, because over time, even using enzymatic cleaners, you'll get biofilm build and you'll get matrix buildups. And every time, even if you run an enzymatic cleaner through, once that matrix is there, once the skeleton exists, you can cook all the muscle off of it, but the skeleton's still there. And that means that the next time biofilm begins to develop, it's got a skeleton to work off of, and it builds way faster.
It's got the genetic code sitting right there to look at and go, oh, here we go. Yeah, we'll build this.
Not even, it's literally, it's like it's got the framework. Think of it like a building. If there's no building there, you have to build a steel frame for the building and then build the outside of the building around it. You light the building on fire, all the wood burns off, but the steel's still there. So the time that it takes to rebuild the building is half the time.
It's like the honeybee. To build new comb takes much more energy than to just take a roll. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, so the next question is, now yucca probably decreases friction, less cleaning effect.
So, to my understanding, the surfactant doesn't really just reduce friction. It reduces surface tension, and it allows for particleization, essentially. That's different than saying that it does not leave a residual upon what it touches.
Okay.
So I wouldn't agree with that statement.
We'll change the viscosity of the water.
Yeah, it changes the viscosity, but it's not going to change the fact that you're still running nutrient-rich solution through a pipe, and some is going to be residual.
Okay.
Actually, if you have non-contiguous pipes, which I just recommended you shouldn't, so that you have cleaning points, but that does mean you'll have lips and ridges within that pipe where things will catch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so the next one is, what about feeding the plants protein?
I would say, what type of protein? I mean, technically speaking, amino acids are the most basic building blocks of proteins. So a lot of what we feed, like blood meal, is highly protein rich. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of proteins that are fed to plants.
And you're feeding at the molecular level.
Your garden.
Yeah. As I say, you're feeding at the molecular level, and it's easier for the biology to grab a molecule than to break down 100 molecules that are bound together.
It's the same reason why humans intake amino acids when we're trying to build muscle fast versus just eating a protein-rich diet. Our body has to take energy to make energy, so it has to take energy to break those proteins down in their organic forms and then build them into what we want them to be. Where if you just take in a direct amino acid, part of that work is done for us.
Yeah.
But it's never, in my opinion, about replacement. It's about supplementation.
Yes. Well,
And
like we like different diets.
What was that, Luna?
Oh, sorry, excuse me. Every cell contains protein, so plants are constantly surrounded by protein.
It's like carbon. It's the vast majority of what we're made of.
Right.
When I get CO2 back in the soil, just build biology. Yeah, yeah.
That said, don't go like throwing protein powder in your garden.
No
Even
doubt.
if it's like plant-based vegan protein powder, don't do that.
Let the biology eat it first. Throw it in your compost. Do you think having a cover crop and having different root zones with different biological profiles increases the diversity of compounds?
So that's a two-parter. Having cover crop definitely influences biology, especially when you're running a system where you're pulling plants out and doing a fallow period. You need something growing in that soil to keep the plants happy. I mean, to keep the microbes happy and fed, to continue that symbiotic relationship. So that's one of the reasons why having fallow fields that are tilled dirt is one of the most damaging things you can do to that dirt. You're essentially breaking up the microbial communities, exposing them to oxygen, so they oxidize and UV light kills them. So the whole top layer gets exposed and dies, but then secondarily, you're not providing them with anything that they can have a symbiotic relationship with and survive and feed on. So having cover crop is 100% helpful as far as maintaining biodiversity in your soil, but it comes with its own litany of potential pressures and problems that can happen. So I would say it can be a targeted technique depending on application. Outdoors, it's fantastic. Indoors, it can be very problematic, especially if not done right. The second part of that question, can you pull it back up? Different root zones, right. So very, very interesting point that can be made about different root zones is I have seen some interesting things along the lines of having dual root zone cultivation, specifically between living soils and aquaponics. And I've seen some really interesting development of terpene profiles. But I only have anecdotal experience with that. I don't have any clinical data. Though I can say that logically speaking, it makes sense, because if we're saying that the diversity of microbes influences the diversity of secondary metabolite productions, provided that nutrition and environment is all on point. If we're saying that hypothetically and logically, the more diverse and higher levels of populations of biology, the higher the diversity of our profiles, then yeah, having aquatic and terrestrial biology would absolutely logically make sense to increase potencies and increase percentages and diversity specifically.
Yeah, definitely. And then we have, what's your recommended pH for foliar spraying?
Depends what you're spraying. Totally depends what you're spraying, because you don't want to be over adjusting your pH, because then you're putting a whole lot of potentiation in there that isn't necessarily what you're trying to get on the plant, depending on whether you're trying to come up or down. I mean, if you're adjusting down, the phosphoric acid and sulfuric acids can be very useful and can provide good results. In general, I go a little bit more acid than base with a foliar, though. What do you think, Luna? Do you particularly adjust your pH off of for your foliars, or do you sort of let it ride with whatever your fermentation or your micronization is?
No, I just let it do its thing.
Basically, I do the same, unless it's way out of acceptable parameters. Like, I'm not going to spray a 2 pH on my plant. I'm not going to spray a 9 pH on my plant.
That'd be really hard to get it even there. I don't even know how you do that. From like baking soda.
Look, I've got stories, man, from places. So I had an entire mom room of 150 moms that was fed 10 pH water.
Whoops.
Hydrogen bomb.
Wow.
That was fun.
I think that it's important for people to know that pH is a logarithmic scale, and humans have a hard time conceptualizing logarithm versus linear, so that every pH scale you go up is 10 times that, 10 times that, 10 times that. So a pH of 10 is like not just for
4 points
up.
above.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's to the power of.
Yeah.
Log 4. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also important for people to know that bases in high concentration work just like acids. They will still burn.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's still very caustic.
Why you always want to maintain the balance. It's all about balance.
Yep.
That's
So,
right,
guys,
that's
that was it for questions. Do you want to close out now, or you want to keep going?
Up to you guys. I can riff for a few more.
I actually have another podcast in 5 minutes. I'm on another podcast.
Oh, you're two-timing us, Luna. What the
I mean,
hell?
I'm not hosting the podcast. I'm a guest on the podcast. Get going.
Share the knowledge. The
Yeah.
more people that hear the knowledge, the better off we all are.
Exactly. Well,
I'll
this
be on
was
the
fun.
Growing with Fishes podcast.
Oh,
Cool.
nice.
Awesome.
So actually, Steve is who I was referencing with the dual root zone cultivation and aquaponics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Steve. Yeah, I've learned a lot about that through Steve too.
Tell Steve I
Right
say
on,
hi.
right on.
Cool.
Okay, guys. You guys have any events other than Luna's going to be on a podcast in 4 minutes?
KNF class Saturday. Chris Trump. If anybody needs to come, wants to come, grab a ticket. We've got
Where?
discount code. It's online. Chris is coming to my house.
Yeah,
And we're
where?
teaching it
Where are you?
together. I'm in Spokane, Washington.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I wish
Where
I
you
was
going?
there. I would love to go out and see Chris, but no, I haven't seen him in person since.
Okay, Luna, you better leave.
Yeah, I gotta go. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
The podcast is Growing with Fishes, you guys. Growing
Yep.
with Fishes.
I hope you guys have a great class together. Give Chris all my love.
I will. Thank you. We went and had lunch today, and we're gonna go collect some IMO tomorrow and do some fun preparation things for the class. So I'm excited.
Nice. Well,
Right on.
if you guys ever want to chat, give me a shout.
All right.
And
Sounds
seriously,
good.
reach out if you want that. If you want to try one of those, let me know.
Yeah. How do I get a hold of you? Just
I'll shoot you my number in the back chat.
Sweet. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you and talking. You don't know how excited I get about talking terpenes.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And I'd be totally down to come back anytime again. There's so much more that we can talk about.
Oh yeah.
Hours and hours of knowledge that can be shared. Yes, definitely.
My pleasure.
Alex, do you have something coming up? Or no, sorry, Ben, do you have something coming up where people, like, I know you do consulting, etc. Do you have anything coming up for, live events?
There's a handful of potential events I'll be speaking at in the fall.
Okay.
As of right now, I don't have anything locked down. This is my busy season. I've got indoor and outdoor ripping in full flow and a lot of clients. So my basic work schedule is all day, every day. Aside from that, though, when I get my moments of freedom, I do like to try to jump on podcasts like this.
Cool.
But no, there's nothing in particular that is coming up right now, just work. But I mean, anybody that wants to talk to me, reach out, feel free. Benjamin Acadia on Instagram and acadiafarmsfamily.com. And on the website, there's all my contact information. Feel free to reach out at any point in time. You call me, email me, whatever. I'm always happy to try to help and always happy to have a conversation and meet new people and learn new things and talk.
Awesome. I just
Fantastic.
added you on Instagram, so follow me.
Thank
And as for the channel, guys, we have Ron Harrington on Monday with Av and Leighton, seed breeder, etc. It really deep into biology, of course. And then on Tuesday, we have Aaron Butler from the Canadian Cannabis Exchange, where growers are selling their cannabis globally, not just in Canada. She's going to be on with us on Tuesday, and of course, Andy on Wednesday. And Andy's with Alex and Luna next Thursday. He's going to talk about how he's telling people he can tell which is a male and a female cannabis seed. That should be interesting.
Okay.
I'm
Cool.
not going to be here, guys. So Silly Lily is going to be taking the back end for that one, just to let you guys know. And with that, guys, everybody peace out. Great chat tonight, guys.
Thank you.
you very much.